you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcasts of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Follow the leader when the leader.
Oh my God.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
I got things that I'm giving in advance. Don't gotta wait till I see it in my hands. Don't see it now, but I learned to trust. You could do a lot with a little song. So I'ma let you hold everything I got, I'ma let it go. Tell the world, I'ma let them know. You the one like the metal gold, yeah, that's a winner. I ain't talking summer when I say you need the sun. Brings life in the night of your life, he the light of your life, yeah, your life at the Christ, Tell me who you know that brings hope to the things that were hopeless. Master to the pieces that's broken. Only one to change your life in a moment. It's only one. Look, yeah, I can feel the blessings coming after me. Practicing my faith is staying strong so it don't atrophy. Watch what I put out, I know it's always coming back to me. Tried to lock the doors, but that's okay, I got the master's key. Yeah, so I'm living with my hands up. What's the problem when I know the answer? I know a lot of people won't understand us. If you give it up to Christ, he'll help you stand up.
You are listening to the Black Pack here on KBLA Talk 1580. I am your host, Adrianne Shropshire, and I want, before we get into the conversation with our guest, I want to thank him for giving us this song, offering up this song as we get ready to get into a conversation that's difficult and hard and a part of the ongoing attacks on American democracy in general, but also on our community. So this idea of bringing hope to things that are hopeless, I love it. This is Evan Ford. Thanks in advance. And we are joined by Jared Bass, Senior Vice President of Education at the Center for American Progress. So welcome, Jared, and thank you for putting this out there for us. It's great. Me and Andy are in here jamming.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me. I'm glad you like the song.
I love it. We just did a segment on this new series that's out on Peacock called High Horse, the Black Cowboy, and so we had an opportunity to throw in some country music when we don't often do that, but all bangers, of course. So we appreciate you, contributing to our fantastic music selections for this show. So, okay. There's been obviously an ongoing, war on education, right, from the Trump administration. And we know that they have been dismantling it in many ways, piece by piece, defunding it in many ways, piece by piece. And then this week, several of the kind of core offices within the Department of Education are being cut and shifted, outsourced, right, to other parts of the federal government. So just to level set for our listeners, can you just explain what happened and what the implications are?
Yeah, sure. So this week, the Secretary of Education announced that the Department of Education would be entering into these things called interagency agreements, which are basically contracts with other agencies like Department of Labor, State Department, Department of the Interior, and that they were just going to transfer the work and grant programs of whole offices, like you mentioned, the Office for Post-Secondary Education, the Office for Elementary and Secondary Education, and a few other key offices at the Department of Education. They're moving them to these other agencies. So get this. Your elementary and secondary education programs, Title I for underserved communities, low-income areas, that's going to the Department of Labor. Strengthening HBCUs and TRIO, Gear Up, those programs are also going to the Department of Labor. And that is what happened this week. So six agencies are going to take these programs.
So I guess the question is, one might say, right, okay, well, that's okay. These things are still going to exist. And so, they'll just be happening within the Department of Labor. And I want to get into that, right? About what that is about. But what are the implications for, I mean, I think, folks have been looking at this sort of, piece by piece dismantling of the Department of Education. And it's a big deal for people. Like when we do polling, one of the top issues that people are deeply concerned about is the undermining of the Department of Education. And people don't necessarily understand in its entirety what it will mean for them and their communities and their children, but they know it's bad, right? They know it's wrong. So what are the implications of this sort of moving these things into other places?
I mean, so there's several implications. One is just that, Department of Labor, nothing against Department of Labor, the labor part is good, the workforce development training, all that is good, but they don't do education. That's not their job.
Right.
They do labor,
right.
They do workforce development. And when we're talking about educating underserved communities, it's basically you call a plumber and an electrician shows up.
Right.
And it's I got an electrician. I needed a plumber. I need someone to come and fix with a leak or whatever isn't, going on in my house or, apartment or whatever.
Right.
That is the issue now is that we are giving all of this responsibility to an agency that has nothing to do with it. The other issue is just one of scale. So the funding that goes in Title I, this one program, is about $18 billion, right? It's one of the hallmark federal investments in education, civil rights issue, trying to make sure people from poor backgrounds, rich backgrounds, all have a shot.
Right.
The entire appropriation for the Department of Labor is less than $15 billion. So it is less than the entire program that it is now going to be in charge of servicing and administering. Yeah. That's a huge problem.
Right. Well, I think this is all. I mean, I have a couple of different. I want to get into this whole connecting to the Department of Labor and then the sort of shifting, particularly around civil rights. I think are deep concerns. And when we come forward, I want to sort of dive into those things. So more when we come forward with Jared Bass from the Center for American Progress. Stay with us.
You're part of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580.
Lowe's early Black Friday deals are going fast. Don't miss up to 50% off select major appliances. Plus, up to an extra 25% off when you bundle select major appliances. And with Christmas around the corner, you're gonna need more string lights, right? Save $4 on GE LED 100 count string lights, now just $5.98. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 12/3. Selection varies by location. Select locations only while supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
Small businesses are the heart of America. But you don't have to go it alone. As the nation's largest nonprofit resource of expert business mentoring, SCORE has helped millions of entrepreneurs build their businesses for free. Get the connections, education, and guidance you need with SCORE. We're ready to help. Find a mentor today at score.org.
All I need is one mic.
With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley. We want to speak directly to our listeners in Altadena and all across Southern California. Recently, we invited Southern California Edison to join a town hall so fire survivors could ask questions and get clear information about the Altadena Eaton fire and this so-called settlement fund. Weeks before the event, the law firm originally connected to the program withdrew, and we provided SCE updated materials confirming those changes. But despite that, SCE later stated publicly and privately that they were pulling out of the town hall because plaintiffs' attorneys were participating. That was not accurate, and SCE knew that it was not accurate. But when shown documentation that disproved their claim, SCE ignored it and declined to correct the record. At KBLA Talk 1580, trust is not an option. It is the foundation of our work and witness. It is the promise that we make to you. And so we will not move forward with any partnership that misrepresents the facts or undermines the credibility that we have built in love and service to this beloved community. our commitment remains with the good people of Altadena. We will continue providing independent, verified information to support your recovery without interference from any outside entity, including Southern California Edison, so you don't get burned twice. With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley. As always, we welcome your feedback.
Let's get back to more of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
And we are talking with Jared Bass from the Center for American Progress, which I keep having to force myself to say the whole name and not just say CAP, which may confuse people in many different ways. So Jared, I wanted to get back to this conversation about the happenings around the department, the not good happenings around the Department of Education this week. That is sort of a part of a long process. I've had the great pleasure of having your colleague James on the show to talk about these issues in the past, and really we've talked a lot about the way in which the department was created for a reason, right? And this sort of attack on it, and maybe maybe because I see things in isolation, right? And so I feel like each one is a bigger deal than the last, and that might not be the right way to look at it. But the department was created for a reason. So when we see them, sort of parting out the department, how does that undermine, right, the intention, right, behind the creation of a Department of Education?
Yeah, so the whole purpose for the Department of Education was actually to just do better, right? To have like a one-stop shop for education in the country, for states, but states aren't the only customers here, for families, for grantees, just so you have like one person, one resource to go to, and to also create a cabinet-level agency, so someone that the president is talking to directly. Before, education was not like a cabinet-level thing, right? So the president didn't have a secretary that they could go talk to. They could go talk to someone else's employee in a larger agency, but was actually to uplift, to single out and uplift, for the nation, for the country, the importance of public education, the importance of just like trying to make people's lives better, their education better, give them a better shot.
All right. And so when we I want to go back to the what I raised a little bit in the last conversation was this sort of so parting out K through 12 education to the Department of Labor, and you said something that I actually I hadn't thought about, where there are kind of industry specific training programs that maybe that makes some sense, but the idea that we would have the entirety of the K through 12 education being absorbed by the Department of Labor makes me very uncomfortable, right, about what it suggests, how our children are going to be educated and for what purpose, right? And so I don't, I had a moment earlier today where I thought well, maybe I'm just being conspiratorial, but I don't think I am. So talk about what the potential of that might be, right? To take, a broad liberal education, which is what we hope our kids are getting, and sliding it up under the Department of Education. The Department of Labor, right? Which is presumably preparing, socializing, training our students to be workers.
Yeah, and look, I've got nothing against jobs, and I think that that's an important conversation. Sure. But purpose of education is also about thinking, right? It's about well-rounded citizens. It's about critical thinking. We just need it now more than ever, in our society, right? I think about the threats and the challenges from technology, from AI, and all these things that hold a lot of promise. But if we're not prepared to deal with that, to take it, to ask questions, to think critically about our environment and what's happening, then we've all been done a disservice, and we are not prepared for the future. But that is not the scope of Department of Labor. That's not the scope of workforce development. It's about skills-based training. It's about helping you land a certain job or have protections in your job. But we're not talking about specific jobs or specific trades. We're talking about their brains, their knowledge, their careers. And so It's not trying to pit one against another, but, we have these two systems for a reason. And I think the idea of thinking about kindergartners and elementary school students as only good for a job is like the wrong way to approach education. And like that's the problem for me. Is just, you are a worker in training versus like you are a human being, you are a citizen in training.
That's being
and
that's being educated, on a whole host of things. The problem is that there are many problems, but that this doesn't sit in isolation, right, from other things that we've seen, not just the federal government do, but state governors do as well. And the rhetoric, right, that we've seen coming out of this administration in particular. So saying things like, we want to get people back into the factories, right? Even around the immigration, attacks on immigrants, this idea that we need to, we'll get people back into the fields, right? This idea that, that we see happening in states, including Arkansas, where child labor laws are being eliminated, right, or weakened, right? And so when we see that, this attempt to sort of what it feels like an attempt to make way to be able to have children working in dangerous jobs. We're way back, right? We've gone way back, right, to a place where we have, a point in history where we have children working in dangerous jobs with no legal protections, and a system, an education system that seems to be just trying to track particular kids to those places, because we're also talking about, increasing investment for private schools, right, and for religious schools, right, which presumably are not the places where kids from our community are going to be, right? But it feels like there's this tracking that's happening, and that these things are not, and again, I said the thing about like we see them happen in isolation, but it does not feel like they are isolated incidents. It feels like a philosophy, right, an ideology that is shaping the future of education and work in this country.
Just to pick up on what you're saying, it's also like you can't talk about equity, but then that is so we can't raise equity concerns when we're thinking about these things.
Yep.
And so, that's a huge problem because, as you pointed out, there is a huge equity issue here when we talk about tracking, which is like you don't need to worry about an education. You need to worry about this, like, factory job. You need to worry about this short-term credential. You need to worry about this certificate program. Don't do the full degree.
Right.
Or don't worry about going to college. Go do this other thing. But the people who are saying that, their kids all go to college.
That's right.
Like the president, the secretary of education, like, all the people who work with them. I can't think of anyone who hasn't been to college.
Right.
And I can't think of anyone where their children, and, in some circumstances, their grandchildren, like, are also going to college if they haven't been already. They're not going to the factory. They're not going to the field.
Right.
They're not performing jobs. And so, I think that that's the problem here is that they're selling us the bill of goods, right? They're selling us this, like, false thing to say, hey, don't worry about, trying to make college more affordable. Don't do it. Just, like, don't go to college, right? Like, don't do the hard part.
Right.
And so, like, that's an issue. And I do worry, to your point, about how labor standards, because they're just like, it's okay. We're training workers again. So, like, go work in the field, go work in the factory. You're getting experience when, like, no, it's danger.
Right. Well, it's like, it's Upton Sinclair, right? It's like, it is kind of unbelievable, right, to think that we would be thinking about those kinds of conditions. And, I think it has been very shocking to watch the erosion of child labor laws across the country at the same time. This is to your point, right? At the same time, when there's very clear resegregation happening in the, in our education system, and that particularly means at, these top elite schools, right? With the effort to both bring universities to heal, but particularly the the elite universities, right, where essentially like we're gonna lean on you until you say you won't let no more Black people in, right? Which is really, I mean, when we break it down, right, we can talk about diversity and equity programs all we want, but this comes down to this sense that Black people do not belong in those spaces, and we're gonna use the government and the policies that the government creates to ensure that that doesn't happen. Again, resegregation of our education system is what it feels like.
No, I mean, I think that's an excellent point. So you have this Supreme Court case that comes down that says, okay, you can't use race as, a factor in your admissions process anymore. But this administration went a step further, and they're like, we don't want you to feel at home, no matter how you got in,
right,
whether race was considered or not. Take Black off the centers, take Black off the programs, get rid of all those degree programs. And not just Black, but just like anything different.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, like, that's a huge problem. That's a huge concern. So even if you do get in, they don't want to see your culture. They don't want to see your background. They don't want to see you.
Right.
Right. Make you feel heard, or like you said, belong. And that's a huge issue here. And so, I mean, some institutions have fought back, but there's a rumor that Harvard's going to make this deal pretty soon. We're seeing like this new cost of doing business, or this, what I call the cost of academic freedom, popping up with the Trump administration. As an investigation, you pay them a couple million, they'll look the other way. They'll leave you alone. Right? No finding of harm, no finding of fault. But like, you pay a few $100 million, you pay $50 million, whatever it is, to the federal government. They're like, okay, thanks for the money. It's a shakedown.
Right. Yes.
And that's how it's happening right now. It's just through shakedowns.
Right. I mean, this is all very worrisome, because I think, again, like when you put all this together, it points in a particular direction, right? Keeping, Black folks and others, right, out of elite schools, while giving K through 12 education curriculum over to, or maybe not the curriculum, but the management, right, over to Department of Labor, eliminating child labor laws. Like it does feel like it's important that folks understand, I think, the kind of the scope, right, of what we're confronting, not the least of which is also them, not just, ignoring the law, right, but actively trying to get around existing laws that should be protecting students. And that's sort of the dismantling of the civil rights role, right, of the Department of Education, making sure, ignoring, active investigations, right, of potential discrimination. That is the other big piece that feels very, kind of deeply problematic about the direction that the administration is going in.
Yeah, and it's just like all the progress that we made towards, calling out education, to calling out equity, to making sure that people from like low-income backgrounds or just like other backgrounds, right, that weren't being represented, communities of color, could actually just be seen, and that, we're actually going to investigate these issues. They're undoing all, calling it innovation. They're undoing all of that and calling it freedom. But like at the same time, they are just taking away those freedoms from a large, sector of the population. And I mean, that should be concerning for anyone. The other thing is just like, this isn't just about this, weird bureaucratic process, right, insider baseball about interagency agreements and, transfer of things over to one agency versus another. It's also about, them withholding funds from K-12 education earlier this year. It's about, schools being worried during the shutdown if they were going to get SNAP benefits, or not SNAP benefits, excuse me, but like, free meals, right, like school meals. And if they were going to be able to, just provide for families and for students. And so those are the types of issues that we're concerned about. It's just like on a whim, right? Like the administration just saying, we're going to withhold these dollars because we are concerned that you are, having an unfair advantage. Those programs aren't about that, but like to benefit, brown communities and Black communities and like other communities. And so if that is like the posture that we are, governing with, that's a bad posture, right? Like, to be in service of the people and not like the other way. It's not supposed to be like people are supposed to be afraid of the government. But here it's like government serving themselves. Right. And that's a really, really bad model.
Right. So just one last question quickly, and that is, what can people be doing, right? Because I think that this is an important issue. It affects all of us, whether you are a parent or not, or have children in the school system or not. People care about this issue. What can they be doing? What should they be advocating for, both at the federal and the state level?
So I think the first thing is just to pay attention, which is why I'm so thankful for having this segment on your show. I just feel like right now there's so much happening that's very easy just to go under the covers. It's very easy.
I do that every day, literally.
Right? Draw the blinds and just hope it goes away. But I think the more that we are educating ourselves to the realities of why these things are important, why they're being taken away, that's really helpful. And I think having those conversations with folks in our communities is really helpful too. So talking to your neighbors, talking to your friends, talking to the relatives. I'm probably going to do it next week at Thanksgiving, honestly. But I think having those important conversations are really, really good. I think reaching out to members of Congress, is one opportunity, something that people can do. But just engaging in conversation, I think is good. I think also the thing that we're thinking about doing is how do we do better, right? So how can we help communities? Is it food banks? Is it going to volunteer at a school? Is it actually helping teachers and saying, we see you, we're here for you. Sorry, all this is happening. Surrounding our community institutions and upholding them. I think that sends a clear message that that is not the future that we want. That is not what we represent, and that's not what we're here for. Yeah,
I appreciate that advice, right, for folks both learning, making sure you're paying attention to what's happening, and then supporting the institutions, right, supporting the people who are educating our children and providing for the education of our children, and then as always engage with your elected leadership, whether it's Congress, whether it's your state, Department of Education, the state superintendent, your local superintendents, just to make sure that you understand how they plan to address this ongoing attack on public education. So Jared Bass, Senior Vice President of Education at the Center for American Progress, I want to thank you so much for joining us, and we'll continue to track on these issues with you. I appreciate all the expertise that you brought to our audience today. So thank you so much. On the other side, we're going to continue this conversation, but we're going to look at this question of voting rights wins, which we don't often see, and we saw one this week. So we'll be joined by Jamar Brown, the principal of Politically Correct Solutions. This is KBLA. Stay with us.
More of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580 when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton with BIN News Now. A South Texas sheriff says the surge in illegal immigration under the Biden-Harris administration has led to modern-day slavery run by smuggling cartels.
These people have to be willing to provide labor and other services to pay off their final debt.
Sheriff Roy Boyd told lawmakers that law enforcement should be empowered to target cartels and let local police make immigration arrests. Some Chicago aldermen are questioning Black Mayor Brandon Johnson's plan to borrow $283 million to cover police settlements. $90 million would settle nearly 200 wrongful conviction cases tied to former Sergeant Ronald Watts, who is Black. And Maryland's Black Governor Wes Moore has announced a new program to provide free vaccines to uninsured and underinsured Marylanders through local health departments. Adults 19 and older can get COVID, flu, measles, pneumonia, RSV, and shingles shots at no cost. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Cerritos, 91 westbound. This is just past the 605. It's an accident on the right-hand shoulder, causing a backup from Bloomfield. Speaking of the 605, northbound side before Valley Boulevard, an accident involving two cars is clearing off the right-hand side, but you have a backup from the 60. 170 portion of the Hollywood Freeway heading northbound approaching Roscoe Boulevard. A hit-and-run situations on the right shoulder. 105 eastbound at Hawthorne Boulevard, an accident in the left lane.
Got issues with youth or high school sports? Positive Coaching Alliance can help. PCA, a national nonprofit, offers more than 1,000 free online resources for youth and high school sports coaches, parents, students, and administrators. Visit PCADevZone.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The USC football team has a massive game tomorrow at 7th-ranked Oregon. It's a must-win situation for the 8-2 Trojans. They need to beat Oregon to stay in contention for the 12-team college football playoffs. The Trojans have never qualified for the playoffs in the 11-year history of the postseason format. They're up against some tough odds to get it done tomorrow. The Trojans are 0-4 against top 10 teams this season, and they are 1-7 on the road against ranked teams during head coach Lincoln Riley's 4 years at USC. 12:30 kickoff tomorrow on CBS. For alumni of Southern University in the LA area, the HBCU's women's basketball team will be in town Sunday. Southern is playing UCLA at Pauley Pavilion at 2 p.m. Tough matchup for Southern. 5-0 UCLA is the number 3 team in the country. The Rams are at home Sunday night against Tampa Bay. The Chargers have a bye this week. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Got your black. Follow the leader. Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Head to the Skirball Cultural Center for a thought-provoking contemporary art exhibition, Draw Them In, Paint Them Out. Trenton Doyle Hancock confronts Philip Guston. Explore resonant connections between the work of American Jewish painter Philip Guston and the work of Trenton Doyle Hancock, a leading Black American contemporary artist, in dialogue for the first time. While engaging with the artwork, consider the role that artists play in the pursuit of social justice. Plan your visit at skirball.org.
KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you, when we fight, we win. The Youth Justice Coalition is challenging America's addiction to incarceration and discrimination. YJC works to dismantle policies leading to mass incarceration, law enforcement violence, and the school-to-prison pipeline. Their approach? Transformative justice, community intervention, free LA high school, legal defense, and system monitoring. YJC promotes safety without relying on prisons. Their goal? Prevent system contact and help people exit the system through direct action, advocacy, and education. Want to get involved or need help? Call 323-235-4243. That's 323-235-4243. Join YJC in creating change. When we fight, we win. KBLA Talk 1580, your voice for justice. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, Black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
You're inside the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580.
And we are turning our attention now back to the place where the entire redistricting attempt to rig the 2026 midterm elections by President Trump by going to Texas Governor Greg Abbott and saying, I need 5 seats, and Greg Abbott saying, how quickly do you want me to get those to you? We are turning our attention back to the place where the conversation all began, because this week we saw a decision from a panel of judges that essentially said, yeah, no, your maps are illegal because they are racial gerrymandering. And so joining us now is Jamar Brown, founder and principal of Politically Correct Solutions. But Jamar, I need to, before we get into that, I'm a little bit distracted on my phone over here with the breaking news. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I was just going to tell you about that.
Right, that Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican Congresswoman out of Georgia, has resigned. And folks will remember that, she was one of Trump's biggest supporters, out there doing all the things, screaming at Joe Biden during State of the Unions, right? She was his biggest supporter. And then they just kind of fell out recently. They fell out over her, saying that they needed to release the Epstein files, right? So she resigned. She will be resigning as of January 5th, not completing her term, not running for re-election, and essentially saying that she's resigning because she's frustrated and disappointed with her party for not addressing health care. Costs. She's frustrated with the movement. I guess that's the MAGA movement, right? That she, helped to bring into existence. And so she's out. So thoughts, Jamar?
Well, I mean, like you said, she's been distancing herself from her own party. But let's go back to the 2024 election, right, where they promised that they were going to lower costs, and they claimed inflation was out of control and unemployment was out of control, and they were going to keep us safe and all of these things, and we've done everything except that.
Right.
And so I think it's breaking news, but I also think she's going to end up doing something else.
Yes.
I think there's another announcement in there.
Yeah. Well, there is a governor's race,
and a Senate race.
And a Senate race, yes, coming up in the state of Georgia. And she's been signaling, right? Like I didn't think that she was actually going to just say I'm out, but she's been signaling, right? She's been doing press. Her social media has been critical, obviously of Trump and also of the Republicans in Congress in particular, in the House. So it's not surprising that she would break necessarily. I am a little surprised that she would just say, I'm resigning and I'm leaving after Christmas.
I was surprised that she was leaving altogether because I thought that she would still kind of stick it to Trump a little bit in the ways that she has been over the last few months. But, let's also step back. She is no savior. She was a part of a lot of the mess of this administration. She still voted for the big, ugly bill and all those things. And so she has her part in the damage that's happening in this country.
That's right. We're not going to rehabilitate her image. And
we'll say bye, girl, but, that's all you get.
But she's also, she's leaving on January 5th, which means she ain't trying to be in Congress on the anniversary of January 6th.
Yeah, interesting, right?
Right. Okay, let's get into what we came here to talk about, which is talk to us a little bit. So about where we are, right? So we started in Texas. California responds, right? We passed Prop 50. Missouri passes a redistricting measure to give Trump more seats. Indiana, said that they were going to do it. Now they're saying they're not going to do it, right, because they don't have the votes. We have potentially a referendum, a voter proposition in Missouri that would, undo what the state legislature did. We have the head of the Senate in Virginia saying Democrats are in charge of everything, so we about to redistrict too if we need to. You have Wes Moore, governor of Maryland, fighting his own party, right, the head of the Senate in his own state, to be prepared to do redistricting if it's necessary. So it feels let's just go to Texas. Tell us what happened, what the decision was with that the judges made, and then we'll come back to the broader picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one piece I'll add to the broader is also right before this election this year, Virginia also went back into session. And so we'll see what they do also now that they have picked up seats actually in the last couple of weeks. But back to Texas, right? And so this week we saw from a panel of judges that were appointed by both Democratic and Republican administrations that, particularly said that, we saw racial gerrymandering. We saw partisan gerrymandering. We need to go back to the other maps that you all drew during the 2021 session. And so, we thought that would be a win for voting rights. There would be a win for the balance of power in our country to at least put it in the hands of the voters in the way that California did.
Yeah.
And so we actually just learned this evening that Justice Alito actually did give the state permission to go back to the maps that they did draw in August with what is called a temporary stay, a temporary administrative stay. And then that all parties that are involved, which would be the state and then obviously civil rights and other legal groups, would have until the end of day Monday in order to, submit information to the Supreme Court. We knew that when they announced this decision by this bipartisan panel of judges that the state immediately was going to go to the Supreme Court, which, there's a longer conversation about Senate elections and presidential elections, right? About how that court has been made up over the last 20 years. But now it's in the Supreme Court's hands, and they're going to be hearing something, hopefully before December 1st or December 8th before filing. And so where it is right now is that candidates will file under the new map, but we know that groups like the NAACP and the Legal Defense Fund and the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights and all of these other groups, we'll be fighting at the Supreme Court over the next couple of weeks to ensure that we go back to fairer maps.
Yeah.
But that's what's going on right now.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that can be confusing for a lot of the listeners.
Well, that yes, it is confusing, especially with the back and forth between courts, and then I think also that to your point about the filing deadlines, which is and just so that folks understand what that means, and you can clean up anything that I say that's not accurate. Essentially, folks that want to run for those offices, they have to file to run for those congressional races, and they would be filing on the maps from August, which is the new maps, the racially gerrymandered maps, so that you would have the folks who some of their districts were eliminated, right? Some of the districts were combined. Many of those black and brown congressional members. There is I would think for voters in particular confusion, right, about whether or not their person is even going to be running again, right? But folks would have until December 8th to file based on the new bad map. I think is that accurate.
Correct. That is all correct. And so the state's case that they made to the Supreme Court is that, hey, people are already filing, but obviously the panel said these districts aren't right. They should have never been this way anyway. And so that fight will go to the highest court in the land, and we'll get a decision before filing. So we're going to fight everything we have and organize and support all the groups that are going to be going to the Supreme Court and fighting for going back to fair maps.
So let's talk about just like the democracy piece of this. I know that democracy is out. It's no longer in fashion for some. But there is, I think one of the things that's important for us to remember is that this is really about representation, right? And this idea of letting voters choose their elected representatives. I know that you were the executive director of the Texas Democratic Party before. And so right, like how all this plays out, right, across the state. Talk to us a little bit about what message do these rulings send, right? Even the stays, right? What message does that send about allowing people to choose their own representatives?
Well, I think the piece that is important, just as you said about democracy as we know it, is not the same. And the piece that's important there is democracy was built that the voters, that community leaders and folks would have a say in who represented them on various issues, right? Could be education, healthcare, et cetera. What we've seen from Republicans, particularly in Texas and obviously at the White House calling down into Texas, is a group of people going behind closed doors and saying, we want to hold power. Right. And we're going to draw maps that are not about being fair, that's not about representation, but it's about holding power. And it's this power grab that we see that really challenges democracy as we particularly would know it to represent folks. And so we've seen that happen. Even in 2021, I was the executive director when they were drawing those maps. And even the districts that we weren't able to get, a huge part of the fight that we had was that 95% of the state's population growth during the last decade was people of color. Right. And them not having an opportunity to elect a candidate of interest in communities where they live was particularly our case. And so right now what we're seeing is the Republican Party is moving to an authoritarianism regime because they're basically saying we're going to hold and ascertain and maintain power.
Right.
And we're going to make all the decisions on various policies, and you're not going to have a say in that matter. Because the long-term game would eventually be that we don't have elections.
Right.
And that's the long game for them.
Right.
And so we've got to make sure we fight, against racial gerrymandering. We've got to continue to fight against attacks on voting rights and how some of the rules continue to change and those sort of things.
Right.
So that's the longer-term thing that we've got to fight, is that if we don't stand up and vote, if we don't stand up and run for office and get in some of these roles, if we don't fight back in the courts where we still have opportunities in the courts, we're not going to have elections as is, and people are just going to be picking their leaders and not electing them.
Right.
And that's scary for the country.
Right. And that's why I want to come back to this conversation with you about the sort of bigger picture in this, right? Because we could get caught in just Texas or just California or just Missouri.
That's right.
But there's a larger picture here. So when we come forward, we're going to continue this conversation with Jamar Brown.
You're part of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580.
JP Morgan Chase offers tips for the local business owners in 2025. Small business landscape is ever changing, and the Los Angeles market is no exception. A startup or legacy business, revisiting your mission statement and recalibrating offerings can renew opportunities for growth and innovations. Programs like Chase for Business Coaching for Impact gives entrepreneurs access to expert guidance, helping you streamline operations, strategize your growth, and navigate complex challenges. Businesses with a clear sense of purpose can navigate any challenge effectively, but also build stronger customer loyalty. Visit chase.com/coaching for impact for more information. This segment is sponsored by JP Morgan Chase.
The holidays can be a time of increased stress for those struggling with opioid or stimulant addiction. They can also be a time for pause, reflection, opportunity, and new beginnings. This holiday season, choose treatment and recovery, embrace the company of family and friends, and create special moments. Find a proven opioid or stimulant addiction treatment provider near you at choosechangeca.org.
KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. The Autopsy Initiative provides a second autopsy free of charge for victims' families who have lost their loved ones due to a police-related death. The services offered through the initiative include the completion of a second autopsy, disclosure of preliminary findings, and a final autopsy report. A police-related death is when an individual is harmed by police officers using deadly force, which results in an individual's death. Police-related death includes in-custody deaths, including those that arise during contact with law enforcement officers during arrest, pursuit, booking, transport, or incarceration. The Autopsy Initiative has a team of board-certified pathologists on call. An autopsy request may be completed by anyone with a close relationship with the victim, which may include the victim's spouse, partner, relative, close friend, or lawyer. To request a free second autopsy for a victim of police violence, please visit knowyourrightscamp.com. That's knowyourrightscamp.com. Then click on Autopsy, then click on Request. At KBLA, we believe in justice for victims of police violence. We say their names, and we don't black down. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Let's get back to more of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
We are wrapping up our conversation with Jamar Brown, founder and principal of Politically Correct Solutions. So, Jamar, we were talking about what's happening in Texas right now. So, the Supreme Court has stepped in, said that the maps from August, which are the racially gerrymandered maps, can stand so that people that want to run for Congress can file to run, and then folks will have to come back and argue, right, to get rid of those maps. So that's where that stands. But it is happening again in a broader context, right, around an attempt to steal the 2026 election. We talk all the time about how these folks can't win. Their ideas are not popular. People do not like it, especially in a moment where you talked about, folks showed up for costs to come down, right, to be able to afford groceries and housing and health care, right, and none of that has happened. In fact, it's all gotten worse. And so they know they're not popular. And so the only way that they can really win is to cheat, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what all this is. It's about cheating in order to be able to hold power. And so they have to do it not in one place, but in many. Right. And so let's just talk a little bit about what things are looking like right now, right, in this configuration of their attempts to get seats from here and from there, because the movement in the last 2 weeks or so, particularly as you raised with the big wins of Virginia, looks like it might, it could backfire on them.
Right. Well, I think that it's not just about cheating, right? And yes, that's what they're doing, but it's also about moving the goalposts and changing the rules in the game.
In the middle of the game.
And one thing that I hate is a cheater who changes the rules, who makes up things as you go.
Right.
And that's exactly what they're doing right now. And this actually has a real impact on what is the 2026 election, right? It's about making sure that races are not competitive, that they don't actually have to fight to hold and maintain power. This is about ensuring that Black and brown people actually lose representation.
Yes.
This is actually the congressional delegations and even state legislatures actually become more radical and more extreme in terms of, and when we think about policies about costs and about creating jobs and protecting health care and SNAP benefits and reproductive rights and all those things, right? And so at the end of the day, those are the things that matter and what they're doing in the long term as well. And so what happens when you play with fire, you get burned. And so the difference between a Texas or in a California is, voters in California showed up and agreed to those maps.
Right.
Whereas, a small group of mostly white men got in a room and said, this line should go here, that line should go here, this precinct should go here, and that precinct should go there. And and we could do it because we want to do it. And voters in California said that's unacceptable. And so, yes, we have to make sure that we maintain what this redistricting fight looks like. And some of that will be, what are the opportunities to push back? So you laid some of that out where they were trying to fight for that in Maryland. Or, we're trying to look at that in Virginia to offset not just Texas, but also Missouri, also Florida, almost was Indiana. And so it's got to be a longer-term strategy. And we should also be thinking about, what does the strategy mean for 2030 when the census comes back around? That just in 5 years, we're going to be drawing lines all over again.
Right.
If not again before the 5 years, right? Because of the way that you're changing the rules. And this is going to be a long-term fight, and we are going to have to start thinking about that when we hold the White House, the Congress, as well. We're going to have to start thinking about what policy and legislation that we can put in place that provides federal protections that we have lost in the Voting Rights Act and things that have been gutted at the Supreme Court level. So this is just a long-term fight that hurts Black and brown people intentionally because they know the country is getting blacker, the country is getting browner. And it's about that in 30 years still having white conservatives maintain power, and that's the long term.
Well, you raise a couple of really great points. And so one is we in 5 years, in theory, right, we'll have a census, which, in the Trump administration 1.0, right, they tried to change the way that the census is done, right? They have talked about trying to make changes around the census, going into 2030. They've obviously made changes in terms of redrawing lines because they're having people do these mid-decade, redistricting processes. You also talked about, the sort of end goal here is to not have free and fair elections, right? Like, we may continue to have elections. They have elections in Russia, right? They have elections in Hungary, right? Like, they have elections. Right. Like, they have elections in places where they have authoritarian, governments and quite frankly, dictatorships. But they're not free and fair, right? And so I think that, like, if that's the long game, part of, all of this means, what are we all doing? Right. If this is a democracy of and for and by the people, the only way, right, that we get out of this is by engagement of the people, because the things that you are saying absolutely will come to be. Right. You know, if we're not engaging in the electoral process. I was talking to a colleague earlier today who was saying that he had a very, disturbing conversation with his brother a couple of weekends ago, where his brother was like, I think I'm just done. I think I'm done voting. Oh, wow. It doesn't seem to be making any difference. But, sort of both sides, right? And some of it, a lot of it is like what's showing up on people's social media feeds. But it does feel like right now in particular, we need to be digging in and having conversations, right? Not, certainly in our communities, certainly among our families, right? This is a conversation with his brother at his, wedding weekend, right? His brother's getting married and he's saying, look, I don't know if I can, continue to show up like this. But I just wonder your thoughts, right, on how people need to engage right now, considering the stakes are so high, and you lay them out very starkly. And those things are all those are possible realities, right? They're not. This is not. This is the timeline. It's a ridiculous timeline. We wish we weren't living in it, but we are. But just your thoughts on how people should be engaging, and advice you have for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things I think, going back to even your brother's example about the conversation around voting, is that voting can't only be the only solution. We have to show people that this is a process. And so we have to, as you just said, have conversations, but not leading up to an election. It's about having conversations now. We just came off of elections. Okay, we're going into the holiday season. What are your issues? What's going on with you? What's going on with your family, what's going on with your community, and in continuing those conversations, because we have to walk people through a journey. And it's not just voting in the presidential election. Now we show people it was important to go vote in school board elections. Right. It was important to vote in city council elections, gubernatorial elections. Now I think the long-term strategy has to be, if we want to protect voting rights, especially around redistricting, is winning state legislatures now. And so now, having those hyper-local conversations and really servicing people and meeting people where they were. Yeah. So, for example, during the government shutdown, and even, in the fight about SNAP benefits, more elected officials actually were hosting food distribution drives. Right, just meeting people in their communities and meeting people where they are. Yeah. Now, we know that, any elected official cannot replace a full program that fed 40 million people. That's right. But it's still about the signature of showing up in your respective community. And so demanding that of your elected officials, participating in elections, but also, I'm going to go out on a limb on this one, it's about investigating the candidates. Yeah. And we have to fight through misinformation and disinformation about issues and candidates, right?
I think that's right. I think
it's also the candidate quality of who's running, who are these, and how are they messaging to people, and how are they showing up to people. Well, I think that's a huge part of why people don't vote, is because a lot of times people don't know who they're elected. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. I think that's all really important advice, and I appreciate that, especially that, know who you're voting for. But also, we take care of our people. I mean, I think we're in a moment where, again, it's going to take all of us to engage. And so I appreciate you, Jamar, for joining, talking about what's happening in Texas, and then just giving us some broader oversight about what we are facing, and sort of engaging. So thank you so much. I appreciate you. We'll tap back in with you as things unfold around this Texas case. But I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate all of you being here with me on the Black Pack. We'll be back next Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. as you know, right here on KBLA Talk 1580. And I want to wish everybody a happy holidays, because I will not talk to you before then. But happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your weekend.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Amber Payton with BIN News Now. 9 black women in Chesapeake, Virginia are suing Cork and Bull Chop House, saying they were unfairly kicked out and humiliated after a fight they were not involved in.
We can say this is discrimination. We can say this violates the Equal Protection Clause.
Supported by the NAACP, they tell Wavy News 10 it is racial discrimination